Mate, got a cough to get off. G'day. How are we all? Well, it's the wee hours here in Ireland. About midnight, as it were. So I thought I'd jump on. Bit of a midnight toker, as it were. I'm not long back from Ballina, where I emceed a comedy night with some fabulous comics. We had a couple of comics from Sligo Comedy Club, the divine Brian Sexton and Kieran Gillen. We had Leitrim comic John Brennan. And John's also a bit of a radio personality in Roscommon Radio. I'm going to appear in a bit of live chat with him tomorrow on Roscommon Radio, talking about the Irish comedy scene from the point of view of an Aussie blowing. I had Bob Murphy from Galway come and appear at the club, and headliner was Cathal Shanahan, Roscommon man. So I had comics from all over Connacht come to be at Hogan's Bar in Ballina for the Ha 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 Comedy Club. Went very well indeed, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which will be at the end of October. And tomorrow night I'll be in Westport with Shomra Spree Comedy Club doing the best of the West at Blouse's Bar in Westport. So if you're in Mayo tomorrow night near Westport, come and say g'day to me. I'll see you there. So let me take this opportunity to say thank you, everyone who has viewed my videos, liked my videos, and most importantly, subscribed to the channel. I've got nearly 60,000 subscribers, and my goodness, I have to admit, I really have my eye on the prize. Please, please, please ask a friend or two to subscribe. It's taken me a while to get to nearly 60,000 subscribers, but I would really, really love to have 100,000 subscribers, and I reckon we can do it if we all get a mate to share. So find a nice juicy video of mine, put it in a WhatsApp group with your friends, and ask your friends to please do me a favour, do themselves a favour while they're at it, and click subscribe so I can keep building this channel, keep building the community, because there's loads of different stuff on my channel. There's comedy from around Ireland. There's body positive stuff, because I am a lipedema survivor. I'm a curvy girl, and I'm a curvy girl because I have a condition called lipedema, which we're learning more and more about as years go by. So I embrace my curves. I don't let it stop me. I've said goodbye to all those years that I let the body shamers and the misogynists, embarrass me into staying at home. And now I'm out there reclaiming my time, reclaiming my space in the big wide world, and performing live comedy, performing in theatre. I've even had a couple of appearances in films and music videos in the last year or two. And it's never too late. As I've said before, they say never ask a lady her weight or her age. Well, I'm about 100 kilos and I'm 54 years old, so what else have you got, really? I spent a lot of my life, as do many women in Western society, thinking they would absolutely die if anyone saw them naked. I got over it. We've all got bodies. As it says in the short Australian animated film Harvey Crumpet, some people have got more bits and some people have got less bits. but we've all got bits. So I'm very lucky I live in a country where people of all sizes, creeds, colours and orientations are accepted. So I can happily perform my naughty comedy. I can appear on YouTube in my scanty new dresses from Fashion Nova. Do you like my new dress, my club dress from Fashion Nova? Without fear of censure. But as something else that goes on my channel is a bit of literature, a bit of English literature, and one of my favourite Dickens novels is Great Expectations. I've been chipping away at it for a couple of years here on the channel. I wax and wane, as it were, depending on where I am. Sometimes a bit of a flibbity-gibbet. But tonight I thought I'll jump on in the wee hours because my brain's still decompressing from the comedy show. I thought we can wind down together with chapter 30 of Great Expectations. What do you reckon? Alright, so excuse me 1 second. Whoop, I'm just going to step out of frame for a sec. And I'm back. I thought I was spare you the sight of me blowing my nose. All right. By the way, do you like my hairdo? I went to David Martin's in Claremorris and they did a fab job of curling it. Has dropped a bit because of wet old night out there in Mayo Island. It's now definitely autumn. It is cold and damp, or damp to rhyme with swamp. All right. Here we go. This is chapter 30, Charles Dickens' Victorian novel that led to social reformation because of the wealth gap, something that is extant in England today. Did any of you really think that Keir Starmer was going to be any better than Boris Johnson? Anyone who takes a sir is not going to have the common people's interests at heart. Called Labour, but you don't see them on picket lines anymore. I was delighted that Jeremy Corbyn got in as an independent in his electorate. Keir Starmer would do well to sniff the winds, as it were. All right, chapter 30 of Great Expectations. Here we go. Please do stick with me. Chapter 30. After well considering the matter while I was dressing at the Blue Boar in the morning, I resolved to tell my guardian that I doubted Orlick's being the right sort of man to fill a post of trust at Miss Havisham's. Why, of course he is not the right sort of man, Pip, said my guardian, comfortably satisfied beforehand on the general head, because the man who fills a post of trust never is the right sort of man. It seemed quite to put him in spirits to find that this particular post was not exceptionally held by the right sort of man, and he listened in a satisfied manner while I told him what knowledge I had of Orlick. Very good, Pip, he observed, when I had concluded. I'll go round presently and pay our friend off. Rather alarmed by this summary action, I was for a little delay, and even hinted that our friend himself might be difficult to deal with. Oh, no, he won't, said my guardian, making his pocket-handkerchief point with perfect confidence. I should like to see him argue the question with me. As we were going back together to London by the midday coach, and as I breakfasted under such terrors of Pumblechook that I could scarcely hold my cup, this gave me an opportunity of saying that I wanted a walk, and that I would go on along the London road while Mr. Jaggers was occupied, if he would let the coachman know that I would get into my place when overtaken. I was thus enabled to fly from the Blue Boar immediately after breakfast. By then making a loop of about a couple of miles into the open country at the back of Pumblechook's premises, I got round into the high street again, a little beyond that pitfall, and felt myself in comparative security. It was interesting to be in the quiet old town once more, and it was not disagreeable to be here and there suddenly recognised and stared after. One or two of the tradespeople even darted out of their shops and went a little way down the street before me, that they might turn, as if they had forgotten something, and pass me face to face. On which occasions I don't know whether they or I made the worst pretence, they of not doing it, or I of not seeing it. Still, my position was a distinguished one, and I was not at all dissatisfied with it, until fate threw me in the way of that unlimited miscreant, Trabb's boy. Casting my eyes along the street at a certain point of my progress, I beheld Trabb's boy approaching, lashing himself with an empty blue bag. Deeming that a serene and unconscious contemplation of him would best beseem me, and would be most likely to quell his evil mind, I advanced with that expression of countenance, and was rather congratulating myself on my success, when suddenly the knees of Trabb's boy smote together, his hair uprose, his cap fell off, he trembled violently in every limb, staggered out into the road, and crying to the populace, "Hold me, I'm so frightened," feigned to be in a paroxysm of terror and contrition occasioned by the dignity of my appearance. As I passed him, his teeth loudly chattered in his head, and with every mark of extreme humiliation, he prostrated himself in the dust. This was a hard thing to bear, but this was nothing. I had not advanced another 200 yards when, to my inexpressible terror, amazement, and indignation, I again beheld Trabb's boy approaching. He was coming round a narrow corner. His blue bag was slung over his shoulder, honest industry beamed in his eyes, a determination to proceed to Trabb's with cheerful briskness was indicated in his gait. With a shock, he became aware of me, and was severely visited as before. But this time his motion was rotatory, and he staggered round and round me with knees more afflicted, and with uplifted hands as if beseeching for mercy. His sufferings were hailed with the greatest joy by a knot of spectators, and I felt utterly confounded. I had not got as much farther down the road as the post office, when I again beheld Trabb's boy shooting round by a back way. This time he was utterly changed. He wore the blue bag in the manner of my greatcoat, and was strutting along the pavement towards me on the opposite side of the street, attended by a company of delighted young friends, to whom he from time to time exclaimed, with a wave of his hand, "Don't know ya!" Words cannot state the amount of aggravation and injury wreaked upon me by Trabb's boy, when, passing ahead of me, he pulled up his shirt collar, twined his side hair, stuck an arm akimbo, and smoked extravagantly by, wriggling his elbows and body, and drawling to his attendants, "Don't know ya, 'pon my soul, don't know ya." The disgrace attendant on his immediately afterwards taking me to crowing, and pursuing me across the bridge with crows as from an exceedingly dejected fowl who had known me when I was a blacksmith, culminated the disgrace with which I left the town, and was, so to speak, ejected by it into the open country. But unless I had taken the life of Trabb's boy on that occasion, I really do not even now know what I could have done save endure. To have struggled with him in the street, or to have exacted any lower recompense from him than his heart's best blood, would have been futile and degrading. Moreover, he was a boy with whom no man could hurt, an invulnerable and dodging serpent who, when chased into a corner, flew out again between his captor's legs, scornfully yelping. I wrote, however, to Mr. Trabb by next day's post, to say that Mr. Pitt must decline to deal further with one who could so far forget what he owed to the best interests of society as to employ a boy who excited loathing in every respectable mind. The coach, with Mr. Jaggers inside, came up in due time, and I took my box seat again and arrived in London safe, but not sound, for my heart was gone. As soon as I arrived, I sent a penitential codfish and barrel of oysters to Joe, as reparation for not having gone myself, and then went on to Barnard's Inn. I found Herbert dining on cold meat, and delighted to welcome me back. Having dispatched the Avenger to the coffee-house for an addition to the dinner, I felt that I must open my breast that very evening to my friend and chum. As confidence was out of the question with the Avenger in the hall, which could merely be regarded in the light of an antechamber to the keyhole, I sent him to the play. A better proof of the severity of my bondage to that taskmaster could scarcely be afforded than the degrading shifts to which I was constantly driven to find him employment. So mean is extremity that I sometimes sent him to Hyde Park Corner to see what o'clock it was. Dinner done, and we sitting with our feet upon the fender, I said to Herbert, "My dear Herbert, I have something very particular to tell you." "My dear Handel," he returned, "I shall esteem and respect your confidence." "It concerns myself, Herbert," said I, "and one other person." Herbert crossed his feet, looked at the fire with his head on one side, and having looked at it in vain for some time, looked at me, because I didn't go on. "Herbert," said I, laying my hand upon his knee, I adore Estella." Instead of being transfixed, Herbert replied in an easy matter-of-course way, "Exactly." "Well?" "Well, Herbert, is that all you say? Well?" "What next, I mean," said Herbert. "Of course I know that." "How do you know it?" said I. "How do I know it, Handel?" "Why, from you." "I never told you." "Told me? You have never told me when you've got your hair cut, but I've had senses to perceive it. You have always adored her, ever since I have known you. You brought your adoration and your portmanteau here together. Told me? Why, you have always told me all day long. When you told me your own story, you told me plainly that you began adoring her the first time you saw her, when you were very young indeed." "Very well, then," said I, to whom this was a new and not unwelcome light. "I have never left off adoring her. And she has come back, a most beautiful and most elegant creature. And I saw her yesterday, and if I adored her before, I now doubly adore her." "Lucky for you, then, Handel," said Herbert, "that you are picked out for her and allotted to her. Without encroaching on forbidden ground, we may venture to say that there can be no doubt between ourselves of that fact. Have you any idea yet of Estella's views on the adoration question?" I shook my head gloomily. "Oh, she is thousands of miles away from me," said I. "Patience, my dear Handel. Time enough, time enough. But you have something more to say?" "I'm ashamed to say it," I returned, "and yet it's no worse to say it than to think it. You call me a lucky fellow. Of course, I am. I was a blacksmith boy, but yesterday I am... What shall I say I am today?" "Say a good fellow, if you want a phrase," returned Herbert, smiling and clapping his hands on the back of mine. "A good fellow, with impetuosity and hesitation, boldness and diffidence, action and dreaming, curiously mixed in him." I stopped for a moment to consider whether there really was this mixture in my character. On the whole, I by no means recognized the analysis, but I thought it not worth disputing. "When I ask what I am to call myself today, Herbert," I went on, "I suggest what I have in my thoughts. You say I am lucky. I know I have done nothing to raise myself in life, and that fortune alone has raised me. That is being very lucky. And yet, when I think of Estella—" "And when don't you know," Herbert threw in, with his eyes on the fire, which I thought kind and sympathetic of him. "Then, my dear Herbert, I cannot tell you how dependent and uncertain I feel, and how exposed to hundreds of chances. Avoiding forbidden ground, as you did just now, I may still say that on the constancy of one person, naming no person, all my expectations depend. And at the best, how indefinite and unsatisfactory, only to know so vaguely what they are. In saying this, I relieved my mind of what had always been there, more or less, though no doubt most since yesterday. Now, Handel, Herbert replied in his gay, hopeful way, it seems to me that this is the dependency of the tender passion. We are looking into our gift horse's mouth with a magnifying glass. Likewise, it seems to me that concerning our attention on the examination, we altogether overlook one of the best points of the animal. Didn't you tell me that your guardian, Mr. Jaggers, told you in the beginning that you were not endowed with expectations only? And even if he had not told you so, though that is a very large if, I grant, could you believe that all men in London, Mr. Jaggers is the man to hold his present relations towards you unless he was sure of his ground? I said I could not deny that this was a strong point. I said it, people often do so in such cases, like a rather reluctant concession to truth and justice, as if I wanted to deny it. I should think it was a strong point, said Herbert, and I should think you would be puzzled to imagine a stronger. As to the rest, you must bide your guardian's time, and he must bide his client's time. You'll be 1 and 20 before you know where you are, and then perhaps you'll get some further enlightenment. At all events, you'll be nearer getting it, for it must come at last. What a hopeful disposition you have, said I, gratefully admiring his cheery ways. I ought to have, said Herbert, for I have not much else. I must acknowledge, by the by, that the good sense of what I have just said is not my own but my father's. The only remark I ever heard him make on your story was the final one. The thing is settled and done, or Mr. Jaggers would not be in it. And now, before I say anything more about my father or my father's son, and repay confidence with confidence, I want to make myself seriously disagreeable to you for a moment, positively repulsive. You won't succeed, said I. Oh, yes, I shall, said he. 1, 2, 3, and now I'm in for it. Handel, my good fellow. Though he spoke in this light tone, he was very much in earnest. I have been thinking since we have been talking with our feet on this fender that Estella cannot surely be a condition of your inheritance if she was never referred to by your guardian. Am I right in so understanding what you have told me, so that he never referred to her directly or indirectly in any way? Never even hinted, for instance, that your patron might have views as to your marriage ultimately? Never. Now, Handel, I am quite free from the flavour of sour grapes, upon my soul and honour, not being bound to her. Can you not detach yourself from her? I told you I should be disagreeable. I turned my head aside, for with a rush and a sweep, like the old marsh winds coming up from the sea, a feeling like that which had subdued me on the morning when I left the forge, when the mist was solemnly rising, and when I laid my hand upon the village finger-post, smote upon my heart again. There was silence between us for a little while. Yes, but, my dear Handel, Herbert went on, as if we had been talking instead of silent, its having been so strongly rooted in the breast of a boy whom nature and circumstances made so romantic renders it very serious. Think of her bringing up, and think of Miss Havisham. Think of what she is herself. Now I am repulsive and you abominate me. This may lead to miserable things. I know it, Herbert, said I, with my head still turned away, but I can't help it. You can't detach yourself? No. Impossible. You can't try, Handel? No. Impossible. Well, said Herbert, getting up with a lively shake as if he had been asleep and stirring the fire, now I'll endeavour to make myself agreeable again. So he went round the room and shook the curtains out, put the chairs in their places, tidied the books and so forth that were lying about, looked into the hall, peeped into the letter-box, shut the door, and came back to his chair by the fire, when he sat down, nursing his left leg in both arms. I was going to say a word or two, Handel, concerning my father and my father's son. I'm afraid it is scarcely necessary for my father's son to remark that my father's establishment is not particularly brilliant in its housekeeping. There is always plenty, Herbert, said I, to say something encouraging. Oh, yes, and so the dustman says, I believe, with the strongest approval, and so does the marine store shop in the back street. Gravely, Handel, for the subject is grave enough. You know how it is as well as I do. I suppose there was a time once when my father had not given matters up. But if ever there was, the time is gone. May I ask you if you ever had an opportunity of remarking, down in your part of the country, that the children of not exactly suitable marriages are always most particularly anxious to be married? This was such a singular question that I asked him in return, Is it so? I don't know, said Herbert. That's what I want to know, because it is decidedly the case with us. My poor sister Charlotte, who was next to me and died before she was 14, was a striking example. Little Jane is the same. In her desire to be matrimonially established, you might suppose her to have passed a short existence in the perpetual contemplation of domestic bliss. Little Alec in the frock has already made arrangements for his union with a suitable young person at Kew. And indeed, I think we are all engaged, except the baby. Then you are, said I. I am, said Herbert, but it's a secret. I assured him of my keeping the secret and begged to be favoured with further particulars. He had spoken so sensibly and feelingly of my weakness that I wanted to know something about his strength. May I ask the name? I said. Name of Clara, said Herbert. Live in London? Yes. Perhaps I ought to mention, said Herbert, who had become curiously crestfallen and meek since we entered on the interesting theme, that she is rather below my mother's nonsensical family notions. Her father had to do with the victualling of passenger ships. I think he was a species of purser. What is he now? Said I. He's an invalid now, replied Herbert. Living on the first floor, said Herbert, which was not at all what I meant, for I had intended my question to apply to his means. I have never seen him, for he has always kept his room overhead since I have known Clara. But I have heard him constantly. He makes tremendous rows, roars and pegs at the floor with some frightful instrument. In looking at me and then laughing heartily, Herbert for the time recovered his usual lively manner. Don't you expect to see him? Said I. Oh, yes, I constantly expect to see him, returned Herbert, because I never hear him without expecting him to come tumbling through the ceiling. But I don't know how long the rafters may hold. We had once more laughed heartily. He became meek again and told me that the moment he began to realise capital, it was his intention to marry this young lady. He added as a self-evident proposition, engendering low spirits, But you can't marry, you know, while you're looking about you. As we contemplated the fire, and as I thought what a difficult vision to realise this same capital sometimes was, I put my hands in my pockets. A folded piece of paper in one of them attracting my attention, I opened it and found it to be the playbill I had received from Joe, relative to the celebrated provincial amateur of Roskin renown. And bless my heart, I involuntarily added aloud, it's tonight. This changed the subject in an instant and made us hurriedly resolve to go to the play. So when I had pledged myself to comfort and abet Herbert in the affair of his heart by all practicable and impracticable means, and when Herbert had told me that his affianced already knew me by reputation, and that I should be presented to her, and when we had warmly shaken hands upon our mutual confidence, we blew out our candles, made up our fire, locked our door, and issued forth in quest of Mr. Wopsle and Denmark. And that was chapter 30 of Great Expectations, the last page entitled Mutual Confidence. A splendid chap, Mr. Dickens, although a bit of a beast to his poor wife. Like most of us, she started off as a young woman who's known for the tiny size of her waist. And then after many, many children, she became far more well endowed in all areas, which led Mr. Dickens to seek comfort in a younger, slimmer version, as they do. But still, I hope we can separate the man from the art in this case, because to cancel Charles Dickens would be a bit of a nonsense, as far as I'm concerned. I do not approve of cancel culture. I don't. I believe in boycotting unethical artists or unethical companies. Fair enough, but there's no point in cancelling men who are already dead. So cancelling Picasso because he was a beast to women is pointless. Cancelling Charles Dickens because he was a rotter to his wife is ridiculous. Let's just concentrate on, educating the men who are existent in the world, and particularly the young men who are tomorrow's adult men in the future, in treating everyone with kindness and respect, and paying no attention to the bodies that house our immortal spirit, but instead judge us all on our character rather than the colour of the skin or the size of our waistlines. All right, on that note, I shall love you and leave you. As I said before, thank you everyone who's been tuning in to watch my channel, whether you watch it for the comedy, whether you watch it for the body positive message, whether you're watching to be educated about the condition lipedema, whether you're watching it to see beautiful scenes of Ireland as I travel around, whether you watch the podcasts, you're all very, very welcome. Everybody is welcome here. So please do like, share, subscribe, put me in your WhatsApp groups so we can build the channel. And if you check out the About page or the community page on this channel, you will find all my links to social media and stuff. If you're around in Ireland, find me on Instagram at mamaduck9370. There's a link on the About page. If you follow me on Instagram, then you can find out where I'm gigging and all that jazz. All right. Thank you. I'm going to wind down now. Thanks for your company. We're reading the book. I shall pop on another day. I'll see you when you've got nothing on.